Namaskar. Today I'd like to talk about coordinated cooperation. You know, when the first living beings appeared on our planet about 3 billion years ago, microbes or bacteria, they created a beautiful network all over the planet, and from there life evolved from unicellular organism, multicellular organism, and so on, in increasing expressions of complexity. You know, science explains, they discovered that when an organism reaches a certain level of complexity, it then jumps. There's a type of jump into the next level. And usually that is preceded by some type of a crisis or some type of condition that forces that organism to find another way of expressing its purpose in life. You know, this concept of life as a anti-entropic purpose. The process of life is anti-entropic. It means when living beings emerge, then there's an increasing expression of complexity, harmony, order, and purpose. And this, in our yoga channel, we also describe this as the returning phase. You know, that supreme consciousness, that one universal consciousness was one, and it became many. And in the returning phase of that creation, the many become one again. And as humans, we are on that upper edge of that final evolutionary ladder, where when we can meditate, we have the ability to know who we are aware of ourselves, and we have a capacity to meditate and to experience consciousness, universal consciousness within ourselves. So, you know, this idea of coordinated cooperation is found everywhere in nature, and science calls it biomimicry, and they're using, so many people are studying the examples in nature and in our body and in the biological world to find solutions to some of our own pressing social problems today. You know, our human bodies are made up of some 73 trillion cells. And, you know, they also work together. And so many of them are working without our knowledge, digesting our food, providing nutrients, and making sure that, you know, that whole system of the body in so many different ways, you know, from the tiny multicellular organisms that work and group into more and more complex systems, into tissues and flesh and bone, and organs, systems, and the human body, human mind, which is able to meditate. So this is a very beautiful example of coordinated cooperation within our own self. You know, we are, as a society, we are bound by we're restricted by certain narrow ways of thinking. This may be called a dogma. A dogma doesn't necessarily relate to something religious, but there are dogma also in a social level, economic level, political level. And a dogma is something like any narrow idea which confines the mind in a certain space, or a belief system which is no longer valid. It no longer is true in the present, because the world is constantly changing. Everything is constantly changing. So if we hold on to a belief system which it doesn't adjust to the reality of a changing world, it will not serve the purpose anymore. So it becomes a myth. And unfortunately, there are certain dangerous myths that we're following, and that they're taking us all towards the wrong direction as a human society. And the one that's related to coordinated cooperation is the one of, you know, the law of the jungle. You know, that the survival of the fittest, and only through competition, you know, the fittest can survive and grow the species, and it becomes better and better and better. But actually, this is not found in the animal kingdom. Yes, struggle is there, and conflict also is there, but there are numerous examples of coordinated cooperation, as I've explained a bit, that show that this is not the case. And you know, where I live in South Korea, in our garden, you know, we got a small garden, yet we produce so much food there, so much we cannot possibly consume it all, our small community. And you know, there are organizations that are teaching people how to grow food that can feed a family of 4 using the size of a door. That much space of land is required to feed a family. So nature has a huge amount of resources that when we leverage it and we utilize it properly, caringly, intelligently, it can provide more than what we can possibly use. And we waste so much food today, whether it's from our supermarkets, our airlines, or restaurants, even in our own homes. We're wasting so much food. So it's not a question of lack of resources or competing for limited resources. It's rather a question of how we're distributing those resources so that everybody gets what we require. This is also in that spirit of coordinated cooperation. So when we look in the natural kingdom, the beautiful example is one of them is like the crocodile. After its meal, the food, it gets stuck in its teeth. And so the crocodile opens its mouth very wide, and that permits the egret bird to come and land on the sharp teeth of the crocodile and starts to pick the food in between the teeth. It's like a natural toothpick, And so the crocodile saves a trip to the dentist, and that egret bird and his friends, they get a sumptuous feast at the same time. So this is one example of coordinated cooperation in nature. Or have you ever seen ants when they're moving? There's billions of them, and they're moving. They've been on the planet much longer than we have, millions and millions of years before we came. And they're moving, but there's no traffic jam. They've created a beautiful traffic system where the outgoing lanes are 2 on the outside, and then there's a single incoming lane which is bringing food back into the colony. So those millions of ants, they're able to coordinate together, and there's no problem in their movement and providing what everybody needs together. The other example is geese. When you see them, they're flying so beautifully in a V formation, with so much symmetry and order, and it's such a marvel to look at how they can move. And science has found that when the geese are flapping, that the head geese, the front geese, that flapping of the wings creates an updraft for the geese behind them to also keep up their speed. And so they can fly as a group 71% faster than if they were flying alone. So there's an example in the Indian text. There was a god called, the god called Ram. One of his greatest devotees or his disciple was Hanuman. Hanuman was a monkey. He was a very strong and powerful devotee. And so Ram had given the order to build a bridge from India to Lanka. There's the strait there which divides these two land masses. And so Hanuman, with his strength, he could throw big boulders into the sea. And then the squirrels, they're also part of the animal kingdom. They were throwing pebbles, stones, small stones. And so with Hanuman's boulders and the squirrels' pebbles and other animals throwing whatever they could as one, universal family, throwing those rocks and stones into the sea, the bridge could actually be made, and India was connected to Ram, to Lanka, as the story goes. So these are some beautiful examples of coordinated cooperation. Human beings, you can say there's 3 types of relationships that we can have. There's a dependent relationship. I'm dependent on someone else for my needs or for my requirements. I need some second person, a dependent relationship. There's an independent relationship. I don't require anybody's help. I am completely dependent within my own self and my own resources. And then there's the third type, is interdependent relationship. So I'm independent. I have the capacity and the ability to manage myself, but I willingly submit my independence to interdependence. And because there's the concept of synergy, that the sum is greater than the individual parts. So by sacrificing and working together as a team, the whole family, the whole group benefits more than were I to work alone. So, and here in our channel we talk about the service aspect. And this is very much related to coordinated cooperation. When I have this psychology that let me serve, let me help, let me contribute, let me think what I can give, not what I can get, what I can give. And when this idea, this concept that that universal being, which is in plants, in animals, is obliging me, in humans, is obliging me, is giving me a chance to serve it in one of its forms. So when this idea comes, I'm not feeling bad that I have to do something which I maybe don't like, or which is an inconvenience to me, or causes me some discomfort. Rather, this psychology of service, I feel obliged by getting the chance to serve it through the poor, through the beggar, through the old, through the infirm, through the sick. And in this way, I'm creating a society of love and compassion, harmony. You know, my master used to say that 75% of all the problems of human society could be solved simply by the practice of genuine love for humanity. So, you know, the truths, the universal truths, they're not so, you know, profound. They're profound. They're not so difficult to understand because they resonate with our heart, our deepest spirit self. And so with this idea of coordinated cooperation, if we can try to create this more in our societies, I think, you know, probably there are so many lessons we've had to learn in this year. This might be a very, very fundamental one. And, you know, we're asked somehow to re-examine our beliefs and our thinking, our behavior. Are we really in that spirit of the universal message of coordinated cooperation, helping, serving each other as one universal family? When we can do that, we can move in a new direction and solve so many problems that we face today in a very beautiful, loving, and peaceful way. Not to say that conflict isn't part of human nature. We should be realistic. Conflict is there. And, you know, in any human relationship, there can be disagreement, misunderstandings, of course. But again, with a proper set of rules and going within and trying to understand the other person from where he or she is coming from, genuinely setting aside our ego and our own impressions and our own projections, we can really solve many, many, many problems that seem to be intractable and not having a solution. So with this idea, the coordinated cooperation can be very useful and helpful to bring us to a new order of a universal human society. Please share your comments and what you feel about this topic, and maybe we can learn more from each other about this wonderful idea. Thank you. Namaskar.